sort of business that people want, right in their backyard, obviously.
No, of course not.
Look, we talked about CCTV. There was actually no power to the site.
Yeah.
So our only option was like trail cameras, which I did trials and trail cameras. But the time of night they're coming in, the picture was just way too grainy and, clearly not good enough for the police to ever be able to convict anybody with.
You are describing, from the sound of it, a situation where there is no remedy for you against lawlessness.
That's absolutely correct. Yes, that is exactly how I feel. And that's exactly why I closed the business, because at the end of the day, I can't win. If I go down there and I catch these people, then there's a chance I'm going to jail. So the final decision was, am I going to go to jail over this business?
Do you know?
I said no.
And of course,
not.
And you can't put guard dogs in the business at night for the same sort of reason. You can't do any of those things.
No, well, funny you should say about guard dogs, because again, definitely something we explored. A, I thought it would be inhumane to leave a dog in a yard such as that. And then B, there is a neighbouring business, not even 100 metres away, who is doing a similar sort of thing, and their guard dog got stolen. They got a dog. The dog got stolen along with the cars.
They quite often get poisoned as well. It's very, very easy to take out a guard dog.
That's right, yeah. Look, I'm not saying that there may have been some solution, but, we certainly couldn't find one. Not that was going to be reasonable and practicable for the site.
You've partly answered what I was going to ask you last. I mean, do you know other business owners who feel similarly helpless?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's, just in speaking today from the feedback I've got from, I know quite a few other local business owners, and a lot of them have a very similar tale to tell.
What are you going to do now?
Well, I'm fortunate that I started another business 7 years ago that I've just been doing on the side. And so I'm going to sort of fire that up and hopefully make a go of that as a full-time job.
All the best. Thank you for talking to us, Andrew Brooking from the Broken Car Collection Company. We don't have a lot of time left, so I might stay with, not meaning to be flippant, might stay with automobiles. This is from the website Modern Farmer.
Ooh, Modern
Farmer. Modern Farmer.
Ooh, my favourite.
Got that one on subscription.
Sue Wells' must read. Now, you know about problems with vehicles, Sue Wells, because you've regaled us many a time. American farmers are demanding the right to fix their tractors. Owners of tractors aren't allowed to fix them thanks to a set of laws designed, says the website Modern Farmer, to protect software intellectual property. The world's largest tractor maker, John Deere, in fact, says that people who purchase tractors don't really own them and instead are getting an implied license for the life of the vehicle
My God.
to operate the vehicle. I'm quoting Modern Farmer. We didn't ring John Deere to confirm it. But what this has meant is that tractor owners can't repair their own tractors, and they are legally required to take the tractor to a service centre owned by the manufacturer. And they are lobbying to make diagnostic tools made available by the tractor manufacturers to independent repair shops and owners like normal cars.
I've got a question that I think might solve this.
What?
I know that's a big call. Is it because in America it's so easy to sue people? So if the farmers, is John Deere scared that if they let people do that and then the farmer fixed it themselves and then drove it over a cliff and crashed it or whatever, or rolled it, then the farmers would sue the company?
Nah,
is that
it's just
why?
because they make more money that way, because there's plenty of other companies around the world that have cars that do something very similar, isn't there? Land Rover.
You could be right though, Brodie.
You know what I mean? Like that, it would be
could be a
very
factor.
easy to do that. That could be one of the reasons.
You lose your Land Rover keys, it'll cost you $800 to get a replacement key from Land Rover UK. Not because the bloody key's worth anything, don't get me started, but because there's some rotten little machine that microchips everything, and they have the proprietary rights to it.
As soon as you started mentioning your Land Rover again, the music began. Did you notice that? Sue Wells, a pleasure to have you on the panel. Thank you so much.
Jim.
And Brodie Kane, lovely to have you on again too,
Thank you
Brodie.
again.
Thanks, everybody. Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
Kia ora everyone, ko John Campbell aho. Haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tau te maira I hoa mai, he kōrero kei te haere, he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight, two women on the verge of homelessness tell us Wins referred them to and paid the bond for garages in South Auckland. Donald Trump wins the Republican nomination. We go to the convention, and after 6 we talk to the journalist whose description of him as an impossible outsider so riled Trump he sent him an email saying you got it all wrong. The Māori Party co-leaders make it clear they want no formal alliance with Hone Harawira. We go live to Russia as it waits the decision from the IOC. A Te Awa Mutu family describes when a mini tornado hits, and a part of a new subdivision on the Kapiti Coast bans cats, but how do the cats know? All of that and more coming up in the next 89 minutes, but first Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. Work and Income has admitted it directed desperate people to garages and houses where entire families crowd into a single room and pay their bonds as well. The South Auckland property manager, Debbie Waidani Iskander, rented garages to families for up to $400 a week. People have told RNZ News today they were placed in those properties by Work and Income itself. The agency has confirmed it used to refer people to Ms Iskander, but says it hasn't done so for more than 6 months. It says it does not vet accommodation, and it's up to individuals to make their own decisions before signing a tenancy agreement. A major step has been taken towards healing a bitter 5-year rift between the Māori Party and the Mana Party. The Mana leader, Hone Harawira, told RNZ News the two parties came away from a meeting today feeling positive. Our Māori Issues correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes reports.
Two St Stephen's School old boys, Tukoroirangi Morgan and Hone Harawira, talked Māori politics and Te Tai Tokerau Rugby League over bacon and eggs at a whangarei cafe this morning. Mr Harawira says he's always said his door is open to discussions with the Māori Party, but the offer has never been taken up until now. He says as the Māori Party's new president, Mr Morgan, has made it clear there is value in a partnership of some sort, and while it's early days, this is a good beginning. Since being elected president at the weekend, Mr Morgan has been reaching out to prominent Māori groups, including the Mana Party. Ko mihi ngā rangi Forbes.
An Auckland man whose dog viciously mauled his son's face says he's being painted as a bad father. Orlando Shepherd has applied to withdraw his guilty plea at the Manukau District Court 3 years after being charged with owning a dog causing serious injury. 6-year-old Shepherd Mia was attacked by the bull mastiff in August 2013 when he was 4. He's still recovering from serious head injuries and had surgery last week. Mr Shepherd says his son was playing with the dog in their backyard and was hanging onto its tail when it attacked. He says the attack wasn't his fault and his son is only a child who doesn't understand dogs. Mr Shepherd will appear in court on October the 13th. An Auckland City Councillor says it's unfair and ridiculous that Mobil won't have to clean up the underground contamination of an Auckland waterfront site it occupied for almost 90 years. The Supreme Court has ruled against the council-owned agency Development Auckland, which had argued that under its lease agreement, Mobil was required to leave the site clean and tidy. The court has ruled clean and tidy does not extend to underground contamination. The clean-up cost is estimated at $10 million, and Councillor Mike Lee says ratepayers will be subsidising Mobil's pollution.
It seems to me quite irrational that you can be obliged to clean up the environmental pollution on the surface, but not what's below ground, which is kind of ridiculous, really.
Mike Lee, Mobil says the site was already contaminated when it moved in, and it was being asked to restore it to better than it found it. The government and universities are planning to spend $70 million on bringing world-leading entrepreneurial researchers and their teams to work in New Zealand. The Tertiary Education Minister, Stephen Joyce, says the government will meet half the cost of the project. He says the aim is to persuade 15 to 20 researchers to locate their labs in this country over the next 3 years. Mr Joyce says universities will be invited to bid to take part in the scheme, which will focus on people with an established record in innovation. 2 girls missing in Hamilton since Sunday have been found safe and well. The pair, aged 12 and 13, were found in the city this afternoon and have been reunited with their families. A rare Star Wars toy has sold for more than $48,000 in Britain. The Boba Fett figure from the late 1970s is still sealed in its original box. It's part of a large private collection expected to fetch a total of more than $900,000. The collection of about 700 items was amassed over 40 years from around the world. To sport, and New Zealand's complaints about a lopsided Super Rugby format have won some unlikely support from the Stormers coach Robbie Fleck. When the South African side host the Chiefs this weekend, it will be their first time they've played a New Zealand side this season. Fleck says he'd have preferred to have played New Zealand sides throughout the regular season, as they've been the form teams. Super Rugby's conference system has been criticised for rewarding the ACT Brumbies and Stormers with home quarter-finals at the expense of New Zealand teams with superior winning records. The Silver Ferns mid-quarter, Laura Langman, says she won't decide whether she'll play her netball in New Zealand or Australia next year. Langman has played this year for the Sydney-based Swifts, who play the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic next Monday for a place in the grand final. This is the last year of the Trans-Tasman competition, with both countries running their own domestic competitions next year. But Langman's still weighing up her options.
2017 is probably the furthest thought in my mind right now. I always like to have time to kind of evaluate where I'm at. It's been the most wonderful experience here. Certainly challenging, but I've had some fantastic memories and moments, so certainly a decision that will wait till probably mid-August.
Laura Langman. The other semi-final is between the Southern Steel and the Queensland Firebirds this weekend. That's the news. Met service weather now to midnight tomorrow from Northland to Whanganui, Coromandel Peninsula, Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape. Cloudy periods and isolated showers clearing south of Auckland overnight and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, also Manawatu to Wellington, fine and mostly sunny. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, mainly fine, however a few showers about coastal Canterbury this evening, southwest gales in western Nelson for a time tonight. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers with snow lowering to 400 metres in Fiordland this evening, clearing from the south overnight and becoming fine. Drizzle for Fiordland tomorrow night. Otago and Southland, showers spreading north this afternoon with snow gradually lowering to 400 metres. Possible thunderstorms about the south coast, clearing overnight, southwest gales about the coast easing tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, the Chatham Islands, showers tomorrow, some heavy and thundery at first. It's 5:08.
Thanks, Katrina. What an extraordinary day in US politics. In a moment, Trump gets the nomination. We've got two correspondents in Cleveland tonight. One of them, the BuzzFeed reporter who so infamously wound Trump up. But we begin with work and income. Tonight, Checkpoint can reveal it has directly directed desperate families to garages in South Auckland, along with houses where entire families crowd into a single room. It even paid their bond. A woman named Debbie Widhani Iskandar is renting out unconsented garages to families for up to $400 a week, along with individual bedrooms to entire families. That's been reported. But Checkpoint has learned people were placed in these properties by work and income. A short time ago, Wins confirmed it did direct people to this landlord. Alex Ashton reports.
Last year, Rahapa was on the wait list for a Housing New Zealand house, but with 3 children, she had nowhere else to go in the meantime. So she went to the Salvation Army, who didn't have any space. They suggested she call a woman called Debbie Iskandar. But Debbie Iskandar didn't pick up the phone, so trying to avoid sleeping in the car, Rahapa went back to work and income.
And the case manager there that I was speaking to at the desk, not the reception, she said that they knew of somebody that could, it's like an emergency or last resort sort of thing. And she also gave me Debbie's number.
Rahapa was referred to Debbie Iskandar, a woman who it's been revealed is renting out bedrooms and garages to entire families. Debbie eventually called Rahapa back, and they arranged to meet at a bus stop in Southmore, where Mrs. Iskandar gave her a form to fill out.
It just had her name, how much the bond, the rent, my details and Debbie's details, but no bank account details. She told me to fill out these forms and take it to work and income. So
off Rahapa went to work and income, which then paid the $1,280 bond for her family to move in, $350 a week for a room in a house. She didn't end up staying.
Because we were sitting in the lounge and she was waiting for one of the rooms to be vacated by the families, one of the families that was in there. And I'll tell you, one of the families that were in there was 5 of them in there.
Another woman, Kirsty, has lived in 3 different places managed by Debbie Iskander. She says none were up to scratch. 2 were garages with a scrap of carpet thrown on the floor, and the other was a mouldy, flea-infested apartment in Papatoetoe. And like Rahapa, Kirsty and her son were referred to Mrs. Iskander by Work and Income. They also paid her bond.
It was very cold. I would wake up and my son would have mildew and kind of condensation on his blankets. There was no running water that come from the sink in the kitchen. There was no oven or cooking facilities, and it wasn't secure.
Kirsty says she asked the Auckland Council about one of the garages, and it confirmed it wasn't consented. She says it's disgusting that Work and Income would send desperate families to property managers like Debbie Iskander. Is she on some sort of Work and Income referred list?
Yeah, well, that was the impression that I got, that she was a registered supplier with Work and Income to be able to have the bonds paid to her so quickly. They had to know in the conditions she had families living in, they would be absolutely appalled.
Should they have known?
Yes.
The Ministry of Social Development, which runs Work and Income, refused an interview. In a statement, its Deputy Chief Executive, Ruth Bound, said the agency stopped referring people to Debbie Iskander 6 months ago and is looking into the allegations that her properties are substandard. She says its list of registered landlords isn't about vetting the accommodation, but is simply so it can set up payments, like for bond, on behalf of clients. Rahapa moved to Christchurch soon after meeting Debbie Iskander, but she says she no longer trusts Work and Income after it directed her there.
It actually feels really like, you just can't trust the sort of people that are meant to be there for you. Not refer you or push you out the door, to these sort of people.
Debbie Iskander didn't answer Checkpoint's calls. She's listed as a former director of numerous companies, but when Checkpoint visited the addresses listed, the person who answered didn't know who she was. For Checkpoint, call Alex Ashton, TNA.
And we invited Social Housing Minister Paula Bennett onto the program tonight. We were told she's away this week and unavailable to talk about anything, but that she will be back at work on Monday. 12 minutes past 5. Donald Trump is the Republican nominee for the presidency of the United States. A man initially dismissed as having no chance has overcome everything the Republican establishment could throw at him, from candidates like Cruz, Rubio and Kasich to willful indifference and open contempt. And that's from his own party. His nomination was confirmed today, and whilst history would have it that he would respond with his speech on the last night of the convention, Donald Trump couldn't wait. He beamed in by video link from Trump Tower instead.
Today has been a very, very special day. Watching my children put me over the top earlier. The party seal, what we did getting the party's nomination, I'll never forget it. It's something I will never ever forget. A little over 1 year ago, I announced my candidacy for president, and with your vote today, this stage of the presidential process has come to a close. Together, we've achieved historic results with the largest vote total in the history of the Republican Party. This is a movement, but we have to go all the way. This is going to be a leadership, by the way, that puts the American people first. We're going to bring back our jobs. We're going to rebuild our depleted military and take care of our great veterans. We're going to have strong borders. We're going to get rid of ISIS. And we're going to restore law and order. We have to restore, and quickly, law and order, among many and just so many other things. And I'll be discussing with that Thursday night. We'll be talking all about it. But together, most importantly, we are going to make America great again. Have a fantastic evening. I'll see you tomorrow night. I'll see you on Thursday night, and we will win in November. Thank you.
Donald Trump unexpectedly talking via video link from Trump Tower to the Republican convention. Simon Marks is there in person for RNZ at the convention, watching it, breathing it in. And he was there when Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., announced his father as the Republican nominee.
He is, and what a seismic moment in American politics. I mean, it is really worth pausing just to dwell on it for a little while, isn't it? After 15 months of internecine warfare, a campaign that began that everybody thought was a joke, everybody wrote him off, nobody thought he should be taken seriously, and yet here on the floor of the convention just a few hours ago, his own son put him over the top as they did that state-by-state vote. He secured the number of delegates that he needed in order to become the Democratic Party's nominee to take on Hillary Clinton this November. He is, to all intents and purposes, now the leader of the Republican Party. This is his political movement, and he called it a movement tonight, not just a campaign. In his appearance before delegates, he was piped into the convention on video from Trump Tower in New York, and in a very unusual move, he accepted the nomination in that video transmission. Ordinarily, candidates wait until they make their big speech on the last night of the convention. My understanding is that after a day of meetings at Trump Tower, Donald Trump personally was so anxious to try and change the national conversation away from the allegations of plagiarism surrounding Melania Trump and the speech she made here 24 hours ago, cadences of which were remarkably similar to a speech Michelle Obama made in 2008, that he took the decision not to wait until Thursday formally to accept the nomination, but to jump on a video signal into this convention, talk to the delegates for a few minutes, tell them that he's still thrilled about seeing them back here on Thursday night, but to confirm that he is accepting the honour of becoming the Republican Party's presidential nominee.
That anxiety is really interesting, isn't it? Because it does speak to the embarrassment that is surrounding Melania's speech, but also it speaks to the fact that he still doesn't have the support of the Republican establishment. And that's another thing he wants to stem, isn't it? That's another thing he wants to move on from.
Yes, and it's frankly very difficult to see how he does that. As you know, both Presidents Bush, Mitt Romney, John McCain, a host of other senior, very prominent Republicans are not here. And Trump loyalists have described their decision to stay away as childish. But, you know, they have principled reasons for not being here. They don't admire the kind of policies and the rhetoric that Donald Trump espouses on the campaign trail. It is very difficult to see how he truly unifies this party around his candidacy in the days ahead. But there's no question that he was roiled by the plagiarism scandal. Trump campaign officials spent the day offering a variety of different explanations for how on earth it could have happened. I'm told by people who were in Donald Trump's immediate orbit up in New York earlier today that he insisted on an explanation from his officials as to how this could have happened, that one was not offered, and that after a while he said, okay, well, we have to move on. We have to accept the fact that the media is going to take us to task over this. Now we've got to try and find a way of changing the subject matter, changing the discussion that's taking place around this. But you know what, John, this is about more than just Melania Trump and possible plagiarism. This is about the organizational capacity of the Trump campaign, a campaign that is controlled by a handful of people, most of them with the surname Trump, and it raises questions about whether they've got the organizational ability to run the kind of mature, thought-out campaign that they are going to need to run if they are truly going to take on the Hillary Clinton machine this November.
Simon Marks speaking to us from Cleveland, Ohio. After 6 o'clock, we're going to be speaking to McKay Coppins. He writes for BuzzFeed. Infamously so, because Trump got really wound up by one of the articles McKay wrote, responded to it personally, and many people feel it fueled Trump's singular desire to win the nomination. He'll talk to us after 6. 5:19. Coming up on Checkpoint, the Te Awamutu family are sitting there quietly watching the telly. It's 8:30 at night, and whoops-a-daisy, they're hit by a mini tornado. They describe what that is like. The Māori Party co-leaders say there will be no formal alliance with Hone Harawira and his mana party, and why cats have been banned for a new subdivision on the Kapiti Coast beachfront. We're also just about to go live to Moscow to talk about, well, what is the International Olympic Committee going to do about their Olympic team? Are they going to be banned, and what do they make of it? In Russia, it's being dismissed by some as a giant act of Western cynicism against Russia. We're just connecting with our correspondent now, but first let's go to Te Awamutu, where a family had a pretty lucky old escape last night after a mini tornado ripped through the yard, tearing out the chimney and uprooting a giant kowhai tree. Daryl and Peter Ritsima were watching the telly with their adult children when the tornado struck. I spoke with Daryl this morning and she told me about their very eventful night.
My husband and I were just sitting in the lounge, and that by our fire, we've got a Kent fire, and then all of a sudden this horrendous noise, it sounded like a freight train, and that coming through, it was just, and there was smoke and soot and little embers coming out of the fireplace, and the lounge filled with smoke. And I knew what was happening, and that's because it got really windy, of course, with this noise. And I said to the kids, because I've got 3 adult kids at home, and I said, quick, let's go into the bathroom, being this is one of the smaller rooms in the house. So I got them in there to be safe. I didn't know whether the roof was going to go off or anything. Opened the windows on the far side of the house to release any pressure build up, and yeah, and then there was this big crash noise, and I thought, oh, okay, here we go. So I quickly went and got dressed, because I had my nightie on, so I went and popped some clothes on and went out. My husband was closing down the fireplace, and I went and got dressed and to go outside, and the neighbour from behind us comes out, and he knocked on the door, and he said, do you realise what's just happened? And we're going, no, we're just going outside to see what's going on. And he said, well, you've just, your kowhai tree, because we've got this great big kowhai tree in the front yard, well, that had been uprooted. And he said, and your chimney has gone, you've lost your chimney. And our chimney had actually collapsed down onto our roof and smashed the concrete tiles that we've got up there and made a hole in the roof.
How extraordinary. So 1 minute you're just sitting there and it's calm and ordinary and you're just having a lovely family evening. And the next minute all of this is happening just that fast, was it?
That's right. And in a matter of seconds, I mean, we had a little bit of wind and rain, but nothing to,
Yeah, winter, just winter weather basically.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like this freight train, we knew it wasn't a train because we live down, we've got the railway lines not far from us. And we have trains coming all the time, and I thought, no, that's nothing like that. It was way worse than that.
And so what time was this, Daryl? What time was it?
Roughly about 8:30.
Right. And so you were just watching the telly and sitting by the fire?
We were. Just finished having my shower, and I was just sitting down there to watch a bit of TV and relax, and yeah.
How extraordinary. So I think you tell me you're insured. This is all covered by insurance, is it? Oh, that's good news.
Yes.
And then it was just gone. So as quickly as it came, it went.
Well, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Gosh, yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, I'm saying this with great admiration. You were very calm, getting the kids into the bathroom, opening the windows to allow, air to get out, shutting the fire down.
Yeah.
You sound like you'd kind of had you drilled for this kind of event.
Not quite, but we know the civil defence bits and pieces we've read and that. So yeah. I'm
very impressed. So where are you now?
At home now. We've just actually got the insurance people here assessors having a look, and and then we're going to get out there and start to have the clean up with this big tree that we've got now lying across our front yard.
And there's a hole in your roof where the chimney was?
Yes. The chimney's actually lying, has come straight down, so it's lying on the roof, but it has made a hole there.
And your neighbour, your lovely neighbour who came across and said, goodness gracious, their house was fine.
He actually ended up with my neighbour to the side of me. We have an elderly lady, and that she's not at home now. She's gone into rest home. But her garden shed, she's got a little lightweight aluminium shed, Now that got picked up and over a house, across a house and into the next door backyard and landed there.
Dale Ratsuma talking to us from Te Awa Mutu. We're sort of shuffling the program around a bit tonight, but we think we've obtained good contact with Russia now. Moscow. Russia's Olympic athletes have to wait to find out if they're barred from Rio after a report found evidence of a 4-year state-backed, and that's a key phrase, doping program. Athletes from New Zealand and other countries called for the ban after the damning report from the World Anti-Doping Agency. WADA, the International Olympic Committee, has postponed its decision on a blanket ban till the end of the week. It says it wants to explore the legal options first. That is revealing. Our correspondent in Moscow, Daria Bondarchuk, joins us now. Daria, it's so good to have you with us. Can you hear me and can we hear you? Are you there? Nope. I don't know why we're having such difficulty getting in touch with, I think she's, no, we're going to give Daria another go. Daria, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hello, Daria. I'm going to just...
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Welcome, Daria. It's nice to have you, but we've had a bit of a struggle getting through. But look, I'm going to just throw to you. First of all, tell us about the reaction there to what the IOC may potentially do, and also to the WADA report itself. What are people saying?
Well, WADA's report here is received with a sort of mixed feeling. While people understand, sort of the wider public understand that there are problems with doping, and the Russian government, of course, and officials and the president himself have admitted that, there are some athletes that are guilty of doping and then that they should be punished. At the same time, sort of a general opinion here is that the clean athletes should not suffer from the wrongdoings of their colleagues, and possibly some of sports officials, as WADA's report has indicated. And some Russian officials of sports have already been suspended until the investigation is over by the Russian president, including the deputy sports minister who was personally named in the WADA report. There was another, sort of his boss, Russian Minister of Sports, Vitaly Mutko, was also named, but in a way that it was not possible that he was not aware of what was going on. But that official was not suspended by the Kremlin, saying that it doesn't directly say that Vitaly Mutko was personally and directly implementing that doping scheme that was elaborated by the Russian government, as WADA report has suggested. And we already know that the International Olympic Committee is considering very tough measures against Russia. News came just recently that Russian Sports Minister Vitaly Mutko has been deprived of Olympic accreditation. He will not be able to go to Rio. He reacted in a way saying that, we are always only guests at the Olympics. We can even enter the Olympic Village only with a pass. He says, as for me personally, it is more important that our team goes there. He says, if it's about me, then I'll accept it. It is not the most important thing for me. So we've seen that these measures have gone up that far, and of course there will be an additional investigation into the Sochi doping, and we also have heard the International Olympic Committee urging all international sports federations to reconsider or suspend any international competitions that are being prepared for to take place in Russia.
Daria, all of this is terrible. Let's assume that none of the athletes who are going to Rio now are drug cheats. Let's assume that they are like all other athletes and they have trained desperately hard and devoted their lives to getting to the Olympics. Are they still training? Do they have any idea what is going to happen to them? What is the mood in the Russian camp?
Well, yes, they are training, and in fact, Russian Olympic Committee is preparing to announce to hold a meeting today and to announce a list of athletes that will be going to Rio, or at least there's a hope that they will go. At least they made it to Russian list of athletes that will compete at Rio. And up until a few days ago, there have been competitions going on in Russia, and Russian teams have been training at reserve Olympic bases for competitions in Rio. So for the majority of Russian athletes, this WADA report has not yet shut down the door. Of course, we will know in coming days, tomorrow or by the end of the week, the decision of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is set to rule on the case of a collective appeal of Russian athletes, track and field athletes against the suspension of IAAF from international competitions. And we will later then hear from the International Olympic Committee, which will decide what to do about Russia's Olympic team and Paralympic team, because WADA has also called to suspend the Paralympic teams as well on these suspicions that the entire Russian sports is marred by doping, which of course locally both the sports community and the media are all arguing that A, clean athletes should not suffer from that, and B, that there's a high sort of question of to what extent this has what some experts and media describe as an attack at Russia, an orchestrated attack against Russia on all levels in sports to try to deprive it of, one of its key sources of pride, so to speak. So we'll see how these decisions will, be carried out, and to what extent Russia's team will be cut, or Russia's presence at Olympic will be cut, or at all eradicated. But of course, many athletes at least say that they are very upset.
A correspondent in Moscow, Daria Bondarchuk, who just seems to have dropped out there. It was an abysmal line. It was about our 10th attempt to get it. We apologise for this. This is a really big story, of course. WADA are saying systemic drug cheating over a long period of time. The IOC have to determine now whether they can go to Rio. And whilst that's historic, is it still current? All of this is to be announced by the IOC at the end of the week. It is 5:32 on... Coming up on the programme, new Māori Party President Tuku Roirangi Morgan met Māori Party leader Hone Harawira today, but do the Māori Party co-leaders welcome an alliance? Te Ururoa Flavel joins us live after Nona. We take a peak hour ride along Wellington's new smart motorway, and we meet a man who spends 4 hours a day in his car travelling to work in Auckland just so he can own his own home. Plus, US Vice President Joe Biden about to touch down in Auckland. Will preview what he's doing here, but first, Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Work and Income has admitted it directed desperate people to garages and houses where entire families crowd into a single room and paid their bonds as well. The South Auckland property manager, Debbie Wadhani Iskander, rented garages to families for up to $400 a week. People have told RNZ News today they were placed in those properties by Work and Income itself. Donald Trump says securing the Republican Party's nomination for the White House is a moment he will never ever forget. The billionaire businessman has received the 1,237 delegate votes he needed to become the official presidential candidate at the party's convention in Cleveland. A major step has been taken towards healing a bitter 5-year rift between the Māori Party and the Mana Party over bacon and eggs. The Mana leader, Hone Harawira, and the new president of the Māori Party, Tuku Morgan, met at a whangarei cafe this morning. Mr Harawira says both believe there could be value in a strategic partnership. An Auckland man whose dog viciously mauled his young son's face applied to withdraw his guilty plea 3 years after being charged with owning a dog causing serious injury. Orlando Shepherd says his young son was playing with their dog in their backyard and was hanging onto its tail when it attacked. He says the attack wasn't his fault and his son is only a child who doesn't understand dogs. Mobil will no longer have to pay $10 million to clean up 2 heavily contaminated Auckland waterfront sites, known collectively as the Tank Farm. The Supreme Court has overturned an earlier decision by the Court of Appeal. The government and universities are planning to spend $70 million on bringing world-leading entrepreneurial researchers and their teams to work in New Zealand. The aim is to persuade 15 to 20 researchers to locate their labs here over the next 3 years. Those are the headlines. I'll have more news, sport and weather at 6.
Thank you so much, Katrina. We're going to have more on that tank farm story coming up. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. Quiet old day. No, the calm at the eye of the storm, I suspect. The cloud accounting company, Xero, held its annual meeting in Sydney. How did the meeting go?
Well, it was really actually quite interesting because Xero's been given a fairly hard time from by their shareholders for the last couple of years. I mean, this is a company that its share price used to be like $45.99 just over 2 years ago. That was in March 2014. And guess what it is today?
No idea.
Yeah, it closed at $18.80, which is 3.5% up from yesterday. $18.80.
And what was it in March of 2014?
$45.99.
Wow, okay.
So, and so Rod Drury, who's the chief executive and founder of Xero, he's very good about not overpromising now, because expectations are everything when it comes to managing your share price and so forth. So, so he's looking ahead to good growth for Xero. No timelines that are very specific, but the market liked what he had to say at the annual meeting. And so the share price moved up, and that was reflected, of course, in our overall result for the day, the NZX Top 50 Index. Another record, of course. 7,173, up about 0.25%. That's 18 points.
And the Reserve Bank releases its brief economic assessment tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Once again, this is going to be agenda setting. And what did the dollar do in advance of that?
Not very much, as a matter of fact. It's had quite a few steps down there because of the Reserve Bank's surprise announcements.
Yesterday.
Tomorrow, no one's exactly sure what the Reserve Bank's going to say, but the betting money is on a rate cut somewhere in the near future. So we got here the New Zealand dollar is trading at 70.6 US cents, 94 Australian. And for those who are still interested in the Brexit, which the IMF is, of course, 53.8 pence.
Thank you very much, Nona Peltier. If the IMF are listening, they'll be delighted. We appreciate it, Nona. Let's go back to that tank farm story. Auckland ratepayers have been left with a $10 million clean-up bill after the Supreme Court ruled the oil giant Mobil didn't have to clean up contamination at that site. Mobil used the land on Auckland's downtown waterfront to bulk store petroleum products from the 1920s all the way to 2005. The decision's been described by one Auckland councillor as irrational and a victory for big oil. Here's Rowan Quinn.
The tank farm got its name for the dozens of huge storage tanks that sit on reclaimed land near swanky Auckland developments like the Viaduct and the Wynyard Quarter. Auckland Council wants to turn it into buildings and parkland, but years of seepage means it has to be decontaminated first. The Supreme Court has ruled that's not Mobil's job. It's a decision the Auckland councillor for the area, Mike Lee, says is disappointing and unfair.
It's thoroughly bad news for ratepayers to have to subsidise the environmental pollution of big international oil companies. It's just ridiculous.
Last year, the Court of Appeal ruled in favour of the council-owned agency which took the case, Development Auckland, but that's now been overturned. The Supreme Court says that the 1985 lease agreement signed by the two parties, that Mobil leave the site in a clean and tidy condition, did not extend to underground contamination. Mr Lee says it seems irrational that Mobil can be obliged to clean up what's on the surface, but not what's underneath.
I think they should have been a good corporate citizen and cleaned up their own mess, just as any tenant would be obliged to if they damaged or polluted a place where they were staying.
But Mobil says that analogy's not fair. The company's head of public affairs, Samantha Potts, says the reclaimed land was already contaminated when Mobil moved in.
When we moved in there during the 50s and 60s, the land was not at residential standards, so it was already significantly contaminated when we arrived, and yet we were being asked to restore the land to a standard better than as we had found it.
Ms Potts says the history of the contamination is complicated because even when the land was first reclaimed, it was done using some toxic materials. It's since had multiple occupants. Development Auckland wouldn't be interviewed on the court case and said it didn't know how much the legal costs were or how much the clean-up would cost. But in a statement it said the decision was a minor setback and won't affect the final development as part of the Wynyard Quarter. I Tamaki Makaurau, mo Checkpoint, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
Kia ora, Rowan. The Māori Party co-leaders are making it clear there'll be no formal alliance with Hone Harawera's Mana Party. Te Ururoa Flavel, who's about to join us, and Marama Fox have issued a statement just hours after their new president, Tuku Roirangi Morgan, a former New Zealand First MP, of course, met Mr Harawera. The co-leaders say that there is currently no appetite for an alliance between the two parties, but there is what they're calling an openness to a more cohesive relationship. What does that mean? We'll ask shortly. Within 4 days of being named the Māori Party's new president, Tuku Roirangi Morgan reached out to Mr Harawera in an attempt to work together. Mr Morgan wants a clean sweep of all 7 Māori seats. When asked whether he has the support of his co-leader, Te Ururoa Flavel, Mr Morgan told a Morning Report this.
Te Ururoa is not the party president, I am. And my track record is about building relationships.
After their meeting, Hone Harawera said it was early days, but a good beginning. He spoke to our Māori Issues correspondent, Mihi Narangi Forbes, earlier this afternoon.
Tuku and I go way back to the early 70s. We've known each other all of the time, so it was a very comfortable meeting, very positive meeting.
And have you decided that you may be able to mend the rift that seemed to appear after you left the Māori Party 5 years ago?
Very early days. As you know, when I first left the Māori Party, I made it clear that my door would always be open to discussions with the Māori Party about a common pathway forward. They never took that up. However, with the new president coming in, Tuku coming in, he's made it clear that he sees value in it. And so that was the purpose of today's meeting, and I think early days, but good beginnings.
You've always been a believer that if Māori bloc vote, you know, you could be way more powerful. And in the last little while, we've seen that Māori Party vote just be split amongst, 2-3 parties and not really get much traction.
I've always seen that big picture, and it's why my mind was always open to some kind of an arrangement, whether it's a formal merger or an alliance or some kind of memorandum of understanding that, that's yet to be decided. But my mind has always been open to that, and I'm just glad to see that in the leadership of the Māori Party, somebody has come who has a similar view.
Can you work well with Marama Fox?
Marama Fox and I had the opportunity to do a television program a couple of weeks ago, and we took the chance to have a coffee. She's been chasing me for a corridor about exactly this sort of thing for some time. So I'm glad for her and for Tuku and for others within the Māori Party and those within Mana as well, that at least the opportunity is there for that discussion to now happen.
Can you fix the relationship with you and Te Ururoa?
Te Ururoa and I go back as far as Tuku and I. So there's certainly grounds there for us to be working together. Beyond that personal relationship, there are certainly strategic reasons why we could be working together. And like I say, my door is always open to those kinds of arrangements.
Hone Harawera talking to Mihi Narangi Forbes earlier this afternoon. Well, I'm rather hoping that Te Ururoa Flavel, the co-leader of the Māori Party, is on the phone and was listening to that. Tēnā koe, Te Ururoa, are you there?
Kia ora, John.
Oh, kia ora, nice to talk to you. That sounded to me like an olive branch being extended from the far north. Did you feel like it was coming in your direction?
Yeah, well, Hone has been fairly consistent in his views about wanting to work together. We have a new president. He, and as Hone says, all three of us go back a fair way to the 70s. We went to school together, and he brings a different approach. And so we'll see where it goes. It's early days.
Yeah, early days leading to where, do you think?
Well, that's to be determined. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge. We know that certainly, as Tuku said, our goal is to secure those 7 seats back under a Māori banner, and that's certainly the Māori Party perspective. That will obviously have some implications in terms of Te Tai Tokoro, because one has signalled his intention to come back into the fray. So we just got to work that through. I mean, like I say, it's early days, and there's nothing, it costs nothing to talk. And our president has taken up the opportunity based on relationships that we've had in the past to open the door up, and we'll see where it goes.
While I was listening to Mihi interviewing Hone Harawira, I just got up the Electoral Commission website and I'm looking at Hone Harawira's electorate, Te Tai Tokara. It was a bit of a strange election last time because of Mana's alliance with the Internet Party, but if we look at what Hone Harawira and the Māori Party combined did, you got 11,000 votes. Kelvin Davis took the seat for Labour with 9,700 votes. In other words, the votes splitting there cost Hone Harawira the seat. Now, at some level, you and he are ultimately going to regard that as self-defeating, aren't you?
I think that's fair, and that's, I suppose, the point of the discussions down the line. I mean, a lot of things have changed over the last 2 years since that last election, a lot of things. One particular a German gentleman is no longer on the scene. So, we've got to take all that into perspective. Hone's declared his view that he doesn't wish to work with the National Party. That's another part of the scenario. And again, even working with the Labour Party's ruled that out. So, we just got to look at the whole circumstance, and certainly we'll take a lead from our own people. When I say our own people, I'm talking about our own supporters about where things go. But no cost in opening the door to discussions.
No, absolutely none. Hone Harawira does want to work with the Nats. How do you find working with the Nats? Has it been as constructive and illuminating and successful as you had hoped?
Well, for two people who have to every day interact with 59 people, I think we do pretty well. I mean, a couple of $1 billion over the last 7 years or so. Each year since we've been in government, secured over $100 million each year. This last budget, $130 million. So we've secured, in terms of financial gains, absolutely more money than we'd ever get in opposition. So we're pretty comfortable with that. In terms of policy gains, whānau water would never have been on the table had we not been in a relationship with the government. The lifting in benefits, the ability for us to allow our children and parents to go to the doctor for lifting that age. I mean, all of those are policy gains. Warm up our houses are all gains that we've been able to secure by way of a relationship with the governing party. Do we have to follow everything they do? No, we don't. Because the relationship that we have says that we can vote against National any point in time, and we have on a number of occasions. The only vote that they do secure from us is the budget, which is all about stable government.
Absolutely.
And, we get the best of both worlds, an ability to get gains, financial and policy gains, but also vote against or with the government, which all parties do at one point or another.
Okay, one final question. Let's say the election is in September, October of next year. What are the chances, do you think, of the Māori Party and Hone Harawira's Mana Party working together by then?
I'm not too sure. We just got to wait and see how that tracks out, John. I mean, we're pretty focused on securing those seats because that, at the end of the day, is what we're about. We've got to get those seats to be able to have it and put the Māori Party in a position that allows us to be pretty much having to be asked by either of the major parties or their coalitions to sit with them because of it's a sheer numbers game. Under that scenario, we're to take everything pretty carefully, do the numbers, do the research, and have the discussion based on what is in the best interests of our people. And as we've always said, we will always work with any other party if it's in the best interests of our people to secure gains for them, and the belief that what's right for Māori is right for this country, and under those circumstances, everything's ahead of us.
Te Aroha Flavel, co-leader of the Māori Party, joining us live on the phone, responding to a rapidly changing situation in terms of the Māori Party's relationship with the Mana Party after the appointment of Tuku Roirangi Morgan to the position of president of the Māori Party. Fascinating time in New Zealand politics, also a fascinating time in the New Zealand economy. We're going to be joined now by the head of New Zealand's largest bank, RNZ. They're warning that the housing market is overheated and could face, and I quote, a messy end. David Hisco is also calling for stronger action to be taken to lower house prices, despite the Reserve Bank yesterday proposing a requirement for investors to stump up a 40% deposit for any house across the country. David Hisco joins us now. Welcome to Checkpoint, David. We've scrambled you to air, and I appreciate you being available. A messy end? How messy?
Well, what I'm saying is that if we don't sort of get control of things, it could be a messy end, and looking at other similar situations in other economic cycles. If people keep borrowing too much and paying too much for properties on thin deposits, hoping that they'll continue to go up, what I'm saying is that property doesn't just always go up.
No, it doesn't, and no market does. Are you concerned now about your exposure to the Auckland property market specifically, and more broadly the New Zealand property market?
I'm not concerned about our exposure because obviously with that we've had the LVR restrictions in place for a while, and of course, there's good employment levels and people are paying their mortgages, but wages aren't rising, yet house prices are rising, and eventually it will come to the point where people can't afford to borrow anymore. We haven't loosened our lending standards. In fact, we've tightened them, and so if we're not prepared to lend you more money, eventually the prices will have to flatten out.
Flatten out. That's the best possible scenario, isn't it? I mean, what you are worried about, what banks are worried about, what politicians are worried about, and what homeowners who aren't freehold, and I guess homeowners who are freehold, are worried about is that actually it's not going to flatten out, it's just going to fall out of bed.
Well, I think there's still a supply issue there. Let's remember the government have been working hard to get the housing supply going, and I think this time next year we'll see a lot more houses actually coming online.
In real terms, what sort of numbers are you expecting?
Probably around 10,000 a year.
And that will make a material difference, will it?
Well, that actually will help. The big swing factor is actually the number of Kiwis that are coming home or not going to Australia. The Trans-Tasman immigration numbers is actually quite a big driver of the demand factor, and so if there is a little bit, a few less people coming home to New Zealand, or if there's a few more houses built, these things can swing quite a bit. I mean, the point I'd like to make while I'm on the radio is that in a time of low interest rates, it is the best time to pay off your loan, and it's not a time to just borrow to the max and buy all the things you want. Debt doesn't go away. You have to pay it off. And so it's time to say to people, look, use these low interest rate times to actually reduce the principal on your mortgage and get yourself in good shape.
We're running out of time. Very quickly, are you concerned now that the sort of fall that Don Brash and other economists have been talking about over the past few weeks, in the magnitude of up to 40 or 50%, in terms of the median Auckland property value, is a possibility? I
don't agree with that. For that to happen, you would need probably large-scale unemployment. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is investors should be wary, and that really, people using the equity in their home to go and buy a new home, well, the equity value could change overnight, and then the value of the investment property they purchased could change as well. And it could quickly go from a big number to, having no equity at all. So, look, whilst we've got good employment, I'm not saying panic. I'm just saying let's just take stock of where we are and let's be a little bit careful. And personally, I welcome the LVR changes that the Reserve Bank brought in. It wouldn't have bothered me if we'd have gone harder at it because, right now, if investors weren't in the market at all, I think that could turn out to be a good thing in the long run.
David Hisco, ANZ's Chief Executive, thank you so much for joining us live at very short notice. Commuters in Wellington have had an intelligence boost in the past few weeks since the country's first smart motorway opened in the capital. Late last month, the 10K section of motorway linking the central city to the northern suburbs and Hutt Valley via State Highway 1 and 2 was unveiled. Kate Pereira Garcia, along with Rebecca Parsons-King, went on an early morning drive to check it all out.
After months of construction, the first smart motorway in the country has opened in the capital last month. To find out why it's so smart and just what's changed, we went on an early morning rush hour ride along with Neil Walker from the New Zealand Transport Agency.
The main thing for us is trying to get the flow right. We can do so much with technology, but we also rely on drivers to actually drive to the system as well. And then we have some messages along the way about how people merge, because that makes quite a big difference. So we're coming up to the State Highway 1-2 merge now, and the most important thing at these merges is getting people to try and drive through it smoothly.
The motorway now has an extra lane for those headed north, longer lasting tar seal, cameras, reduced speed limits when traffic is heavy, and signs to give drivers reminders, including to merge like a zip. It's all run from the Regional Transport Centre in suburban Johnsonville and feeds off data collected from sensors along the 10-kilometre stretch of motorway.
So there's a combination of different types of sensors. We've got loops in the road, we've got radar, and then we also use Bluetooth.
That's right, data from motorists' cell phones help the Transport Agency figure out how long a commute will be. If Bluetooth is activated, it sends an anonymous signal which the system can monitor to see how long it takes to get from point A to B. Mr Walker says it's still early days, but so far the $55 million project is working well. An extra 600 cars an hour are moving out of the city during the peak evening rush hour.
Once you have an incident, there's not a lot you can do, right? So what we do then is really just let motorists know that there's an incident and give them instructions via our VMS signs. So right now we're stopped, and so that'll be because someone's put their brakes on ahead of us somewhere, and it happens around the merge points. Let's give you an example. At this merge here, part of the work that we've done, we put a solid white line down, and believe it or not, that saved us 2 minutes between the weigh station, which is halfway along State Highway 2, and the Faundon Bridge.
For now, the system is still being monitored and run by people. It'll be at least 6 months before computers take over completely. In the meantime, they're fine-tuning the algorithm and ensuring things will function properly once it's handed over to the machines. Dylan Thompson from the Automobile Association says motorists want to see more technology on the roads, and those in the capital city are especially keen to start seeing the benefits after months of construction.
I think the challenge is going to be that if people can see traffic ahead, they'll start slowing down. If people can't see it, then that becomes a lot harder, because 4 kilometres ahead of you on the road, the traffic is starting to build up, and we want to stop that backflow.
Mr Walker thinks we'll see more and more of this technology rolled out nationwide. He says things started in Wellington because the road network is relatively simple compared to the likes of Auckland. But the stretch of road into and out of the city still sees 90,000 cars a day pass through.
We're at the end of the smart motorway now, so we're going into the terrace tunnel.
But it's only the beginning of using technology to get more capacity out of the existing road network nationwide. For Checkpoint, Kate Pereira-Garcia.
4 minutes to 6. The planet's just had its warmest 6 months on record, with June marking 14 consecutive months of record heat. The latest data out of America's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration shows the average global temperature so far this year was more than 1 degree Celsius above the 20th century average. At the same time, NIWA says a tropical airflow will bathe the country in warm nor'westers this weekend. Our reporter Michael Kropp has been looking at the relationship between the two.
The latest figures show the world experienced its warmest 6 months on record in the first half of 2016. Russell Norman, Greenpeace New Zealand's executive director, says humans are to blame.
That means we're seeing the effects of all of those greenhouse gases we've been pumping into the atmosphere are now heating up the planet. In time, of course, that will mean rising sea levels, increased storm events, increased droughts and all the rest of it. So it's a very significant indicator of the impact of climate change.
And this weekend, tropical winds from north of Vanuatu will stream toward New Zealand. Ben Knoll, a meteorologist at NIWA, explains.
You have this warm flow coming from the tropics, and it's taken to a new level because you have this big high to the north and east, and you also have a really big low to the south and west. So that amplifies the wind, it amplifies the gradient, and it pulls the air even further from the north across New Zealand.
Mr. Knoll says temperatures are forecast to be 5 to 7 degrees warmer than average this weekend, even though we're supposed to be getting into the coldest part of the year. But it will be very windy, and on the west coast, wet.
Saturday is a very wet day on the west of the South Island. Some thunderstorms as well possible, maybe flooding and slips. And the nasty weather will come up the country later on Saturday. So Wellington, look out Saturday evening, Saturday night. Perhaps the gustiest winds we've seen in Wellington so far in this winter season.
But how is the weather on any given day connected to the bigger picture of a warming world? The answer, says James Renwick, a professor of climate science at Victoria University, is not simple.
Well, there isn't a direct relationship in the sense that you can point at a given storm and say this is due to climate change. But, there's an overall relationship, and other scientists have made the point that the weather is already different to what it would have been if we hadn't increased greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere.
Dr. Renwick says greenhouse gases have warmed the world, meaning there's more moisture in the air so storms can be bigger and wetter. In Golden Bay in December 2011, nearly half a metre of rain fell in one day, double the previous levels, and Dr. Renwick says that was made more likely because of the greenhouse gas effects. Similar studies of flooding in the UK or heat waves in Europe or the United States show the events are 2, 3, even 5 times more likely than a couple of hundred years ago.
The maximum amount of moisture that the air can have in it is purely a function of temperature. The warmer the air, the more evaporation and the more moisture that the air can hold in it. So yeah, when it rains, and that moisture condenses and converges together into a cloud, more of it falls out.
So, while the relationship between a warm weekend in winter and climate change is unclear, Dr. Renwick says in a warming world the extremes increase. While the wet will get wetter and the dry will get drier, everyone will get warmer. For Checkpoint, Michael Crop tēnei.
Kia ora, Michael. I heard in that report the weather forecast for Wellington on Saturday night, pretty stormy all night. The Canes, of course, are playing the Sharks in the quarterfinal, the only quarterfinal to take place in New Zealand at the stadium in Wellington on Saturday night. I just see the Hurricanes tweeting before 18,000 tickets already sold. The other 3 New Zealand teams, the Chiefs and the Crusaders in South Africa and the Highlanders in Canberra taking on the Brumbies. 4 out of 5 New Zealand teams in the quarterfinals. Amazing. It's 6 o'clock. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thank you for being with us. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Work and Income has confirmed it directed desperate families to garages in South Auckland and paid their bonds. The US Vice President lands in Auckland for a whirlwind 24-hour visit. Donald Trump is the Republican nominee. We have an extraordinary correspondent from the convention, and a new subdivision on the Kapiti coast north of Wellington bans cats. All of that and more in the next 30 minutes. But first, Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
A woman who was sent to live in a garage by Work and Income says the agency would be disgusted if it knew the state of the place. It's emerged that a South Auckland property manager, Debbie Wahani Iskander, rented garages and single rooms to families for hundreds of dollars a week. Work and Income has confirmed it directed people to Miss Iskander, but says it stopped doing so 6 months ago. One woman, Kirsty, says the agency suggested she call Miss Iskander, who she thought was a legitimate housing provider.
That was the impression that I got, that she was a registered supplier with Work and Income to be able to have the bonds paid to her so quickly. They had to know in the conditions she had families living in, they would be absolutely appalled.
Kirsty says the garage she lived in was illegal. The co-leaders of the Māori Party say there is no current appetite for a formal alliance between the Māori and Mana parties, but there is openness to a more cohesive one. Te Ururoa Flavel and Marama Fox issued a statement after steps were taken towards healing a bitter 5-year rift between the parties. Our Māori Issues correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes reports.
The Māori Party's new president, Tukuroirangi Morgan, met the Mana leader and former MP, Hone Harawira, in Whangarei today, a meeting Mr Harawira describes as comfortable. He says he's always left his door open to discussions, but the offer had never been taken up until now. Mr Harawira says Mr Morgan has made it clear there is value in a partnership of some sort, but Ms Fox and Mr Flavel say there's no appetite for anything formal. Mr Morgan has told RNZ News a more strategic relationship could lead to the successful reclamation of Māori seats from the Labour Party. Ko mihi Ngarangi Forbes tēnei.
An Auckland man whose dog viciously mauled his son's face says he's being painted as a bad father. Orlando Shepherd has applied to withdraw his guilty plea at the Manukau District Court 3 years after being charged with owning a dog causing serious injury. Mohammed Hassan reports.
6-year-old shepherd Mia was attacked by the bull mastiff in August 2013 when he was 4. He is still recovering from serious head injuries and had surgery last week. Mr. Shepherd says his son was playing with the dog in the backyard and was hanging onto its tail when it attacked. He says the attack wasn't his fault and his son is only a child who doesn't understand dogs. Mr. Shepherd will appear in court on October the 13th. If convicted, he faces a maximum sentence of 3 years in prison and a fine of $20,000. I Tamaki Makoto ko Mohammed Hassan Tene.
New research shows the Northland region has more than twice the national rate of people who refuse vaccinations for their children. This has emerged from analysis of records in the National Immunisation Register of almost 12,000 children born in Northland between 2009 and 2013. Lead researcher Juliet Rumble-Smith says only 90% of them were fully immunised. She says 52% of parents or caregivers who declined vaccinations for 6-week-old babies were Pākehā and 41% Māori. Dr Rumble-Smith says there are several common factors.
One is around confidence around the vaccine or safety or the immunisation process. The second reason is that potentially parents and caregivers may underestimate the seriousness of these diseases and their risk of getting them.
Juliet Rumble-Smith says the third reason is that the vaccines may be physically or culturally difficult to access. The Minister for Women wants to see greater diversity in local government and is calling for more women to stand in this year's election. Louise Upston, who's also the Associate Local Government Minister, says about 30% of those elected 3 years ago were women and she'd like to see that figure rise. Several women are stepping down from senior local government roles in October. Hamilton's Mayor Julie Hardacre is calling it quits, as is a long-serving Tasman councillor Judine Edgar. Dunedin City Councillor Hilary Calvert is bowing out, frustrated, she says, at the lack of change she's been able to bring about. An Ashburton community advocate, Jen Brunier, believes male attitudes around council tables are entrenched and it's putting women off standing for election. To sport, the ACT Brumbies will be boosted by the return of star loose forward David Pocock for Friday night's Super Rugby quarter-final against the Highlanders, 6 weeks after fracturing his eye socket. The Wallabies flanker will need to get through one final training session tomorrow afternoon, but is expected to be named in the side for the match. A member of the International Olympic Committee says he understands why there is caution over the situation with Russia regarding doping. The IOC has delayed a decision on whether Russian athletes will be allowed at the Rio Olympics until the end of the week. It's seeking legal advice following revelations of state-sponsored doping in 30 sports dating back to 2011. Former New Zealand Olympic Committee Secretary-General and IOC member Barry Maister says the issue is too significant for a decision to be rushed into.
When we're talking about state-sponsored manipulation, that is a huge claim to make, and therefore the IOC hasn't got much time because the Olympics are on the doorstep, but I do understand the need to draw breath and get it right. Otherwise they'll just spend their whole games mired in legal challenge and counter-challenge, which is totally unproductive.
The Kiwis coach Stephen Kearney is hopeful playmaker Kieran Foran will be part of New Zealand's Rugby League World Cup campaign next year. But Kearney insists Foran's well-being remains a priority after the Parramatta star took an indefinite break from football. Foran walked away from his $5 million NRL contract with the Eels 2 weeks ago to deal with personal issues. That's the news.
On Nights Tonight, a Kiwi lawyer who has made this country proud in the United States in a very niche sport, the sport of throwing bison dung as far as you can. Also, we'll be catching up on news and events in India with our Bangalore-based correspondent Shobhan Narayan. Plus, we have our regular features, and there's more. Why don't you join us after the news at 7 with me, Paul Brennan, and for Brian Crump on Nights on RNZ National.
Met service weather to midnight tomorrow from Northland to Whanganui, Coromandel Peninsula, Taupo, Taumarunui and Taihape. Cloudy periods and isolated showers clearing south of Auckland overnight and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, also Manawatu to Wellington, fine and mostly sunny. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, mainly fine, however a few showers about coastal Canterbury this evening. Southwest gales in western Nelson for a time tonight. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, showers with snow lowering to 400 metres in Fiordland this evening, clearing from the south overnight and becoming fine. Drizzle for Fiordland tomorrow night. Otago and Southland, showers spreading north this afternoon with snow gradually lowering to 400 metres. Possible thunderstorms about the south coast. Clearing overnight, southwest gales about the coast easing tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, showers tomorrow, some heavy and thundery at first. It's just gone 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Work and Income has confirmed it directed desperate families to garages in South Auckland, along with houses where entire families crowd into a single room. It even paid their bond. As has been reported, a woman named Debbie Withani Iskandar is renting out illegal garages to families for hundreds of dollars a week, along with individual bedrooms to entire families. But Checkpoint has learned people were placed in these properties by work and income itself. Last year, Rahapa was on the wait list for a Housing New Zealand house, but with 3 children, she had nowhere to go in the meantime. So, desperate to avoid sleeping in the car, Rahapa went back to work and income.
It just had her name, how much the bond, the rent, my details and Debbie's details, but no bank account details. She told me to fill out these forms and take it to work and income.
Debbie Iskandar eventually called Rahapa back and they arranged to meet at a bus stop in Southmore where Ms Iskandar gave her a form to fill out, a form which Rahapa then took back to work and income, which then paid her bond for her. Like Rahapa, Kirsty and her son were referred to Ms Iskandar by work and income.
It was very cold. I would wake up and my son would have mildew and kind of condensation on his blankets. There was no running water that come from the sink in the kitchen. There was no oven or cooking facilities, and it wasn't secure.
Kirsty says she asked the Auckland Council about one of the garages and it confirmed it wasn't consented. She says it's disgusting that work and income would send desperate families to property managers like this.
Is she on some sort of work and income referred list?
Yeah, well, that was the impression that I got, that she was a registered supplier with work and income to be able to have the bonds paid to her so quickly. They had to know in the conditions she had families living in, they would be absolutely appalled.
Should they have known?
Yes.
The Ministry of Social Development, which runs work and income, of course, refused an interview. In a statement, its Deputy Chief Executive, Ruth Bounds, said the agency stopped referring people to Debbie Iskandar 6 months ago and is looking into the allegations that her properties are substandard. She says its list of registered landlords isn't about vetting the accommodation, but is simply so it can set up payments like for bond on behalf of clients. Debbie Iskandar herself didn't answer Checkpoint's calls. She's listed as a former director of numerous companies, but when Checkpoint visited the addresses listed, the person who answered didn't know who she was. We also invited Social Housing Minister Paula Bennett on the program tonight, but she was unavailable. It's coming up to 11 minutes past 6. The US Vice President is about to land, we think, in Auckland for a whirlwind 24-hour visit. Joe Biden is on Air Force 2. He is coming into Auckland Airport tonight. Tight security waiting for him there. He will meet Prime Minister John Key for official talks and attend a community and business leaders function. It's the highest level visit to the US visit to New Zealand in more than 15 years. Our political reporter, Demelza Leslie, is covering the trip and she's sitting beside me in the studio. Welcome to Auckland, Demelza. It's nice to see you. You've written very nicely on the pad beside you. He hasn't landed yet because he was due in by now.
He was due in at 5 to 6 and he hasn't landed yet. Yeah, so right. I know that was to tell you, so you didn't tell everyone that he'd landed already.
He's just
That's
landed,
right. Yeah.
Why is he coming?
He's tacking on New Zealand on the end of a visit to Australia. So the Australian visit was always scheduled, and there were indications that we were going to have a presidential visit at some stage from the US, but there had been no confirmation, and our Prime Minister John Key was always quick to dampen down any suggestions of that, particularly, in the election year in the US. So we've got obviously the Vice President. This is the first time a US Vice President has come and officially visited New Zealand since 1970. So this is a pretty big deal. It is only a 24-hour visit, and there's not a lot on the agenda. He has a sort of a 3-hour formal meeting scheduled with John Key, and they will address the media after that. So I imagine on the agenda will be South China Sea, given the Hague's ruling last week, and obviously the US wanting to make sure that everything, the waters are still smooth over there. But obviously New Zealand has very strong opinions about the South China Sea and that it should be amicable. I imagine they'll discuss Iraq and Islamic State and New Zealand's military involvement over there. TPP, that I imagine the US will want to be, shoring that up, even though I know New Zealand signed up to it, but it's still in doubt because both of the presidential...
Trump and Clinton.
Yeah, they're both opposed to it. So I imagine that discussion will come up as well.
And also, inevitably, there will be discussions that we simply don't know about. I mean, Biden does not come to New Zealand just to chew the fat or pass the time.
Yeah, you could expect some sort of announcement or memorandum of understanding to come out of this. And like you say, you wouldn't get someone of, a high-level visit like this, especially from the US, without something at least. I'm not sure what it will be. Perhaps the US will announce that they are going to bring one of their ships to the Navy's 75th anniversary later this year, because they haven't said whether they will attend or not. So, so perhaps that's what they might be going to announce.
Demelza Leslie, we look forward to your reports on it. Thanks so much, Demelza, who is in Auckland to cover the Biden visit. Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, the man once regarded as a rank outsider, a vanity candidate, a maverick with no chance, only has Hillary Clinton between himself and the White House now. As his son said to the Republican convention, for Donald Trump, impossible is just a starting point. That's parochialism, of course, but at the heart of it is the particular psychology that drives the Republican nominee. And this is analysed in an extraordinary piece of journalism by McKay Coppins in BuzzFeed. What's BuzzFeed? Some of you may be asking. Well, it's the internet media company whose news platform got under Trump's skin. And when, during a televised debate, Donald Trump denounced them as, and I quote, the ones that said under no circumstances will I run for president, the journalist who'd written those words started receiving hundreds of calls, texts and social media messages blaming him for Trump's candidacy. Now BuzzFeed's McKay Coppins is reporting from the convention where Donald Trump has proved everyone wrong.
When Donald Trump is told he can't do something, especially by people in power or people who are insiders, then it triggers him to want to do it more. His son just said that explicitly on the convention stage. And what I found from my reporting is that that's really been the case his entire life. Donald Trump, from all the way back when he was a kid growing up in Queens, which is kind of the outer boroughs of New York City, and yearning to be kind of part of the insider Manhattan elite, he's always felt like he's had his nose pressed up against the window and kind of yearning to be invited. And I think that that's kind of what's fueled his whole rise, and especially his political rise this year.
And sometimes, and this is a strange word to use about Donald Trump, but it's kind of heartbreaking. I mean, that extraordinary description of him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner when Obama has a go and he is just not able to cope with it at all. And as he leaves, he actually tells the truth about what he thought about it all.
Yeah. That to me was one of the I think heartbreaking is actually a fair word. I developed a lot of sympathy for Donald Trump writing this story. But yeah, as he's on his way out of the ballroom, just having been mercilessly skewered by the President of the United States and by the comedian who was emceeing the night, he's on his way out just trying to escape quickly because he's so humiliated. And one of the reporters kind of catches him and says, "What did you think of all these jokes? Did you like the jokes?" And he has to think about it for a minute. And he just says, "No, not really," which is, if you kind of picture Donald Trump being lost, not being able to think of anything to say besides the truth, I think that's it's a really stirring or kind of stunning moment. And there are a few of the moments like that I came across as I was reporting this story that really did make me feel kind of bad for him.
And when you are bullied at school or whatever, and you think, I'll show you. It might be a long game, but I'm going to do better in life than you, and I'm going to be richer than you, and I'm going to work harder than you, and I'm going to have a more pretty wife or husband or whatever than you. Boy, when you read your BuzzFeed article, there's a real sense that Trump is just paying everyone back.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and we've all experienced that at some level, and I think that that's kind of implicit to this piece that I've written is that that's a key to his success, that a lot of people in America feel this way, and they feel this way about the same people who have humiliated Trump and ridiculed him and looked down their noses at him. Those same people, whether it's the political elites or billionaires or Wall Street or the media elite, all those people are the same ones that a lot of voters in Heartland America kind of have a lot of resentment towards. And so the fact that Trump has spent his entire life on the outside of that, I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people. And just to get back to your first question, when I wrote a profile a couple years ago of Trump after kind of accidentally spending 2 days with him, which you can read about in the piece, I wrote a story that was kind of added to the chorus of ridicule and scorn and called his long-stated presidential ambitions a sham. And now, the fact that if you read to the end of this new piece that just came out, you'll see that even on the eve of his nomination, he sent me an email kind of rubbing it in my face that he had now won the Republican nomination.
It's extraordinary. I have read to the end of it. It's a fantastic piece of journalism. And at the end of it, there is the email from Donald J. Trump. McKay, you got it all wrong. What, man? It's just bizarre.
Credit to him. Credit to him. Look, he proved me wrong, but it does raise questions about, making a man like this one of the most powerful people in the world, right?
Because he has overcome. I mean, he is thick-skinned to a singular degree, but also paradoxically, he's brittle and fragile and vain. And so, what kind of president is he going to make if America elects him? He's got the nomination. There's only him. And Hillary Clinton in the running. What kind of president would he be?
This is the question that I keep coming back to, right? I mean, how much of American foreign policy will be shaped by Trump feeling insulted by his, in his negotiations with Vladimir Putin or Netanyahu? What if some world leader, gets under his skin somehow, or is he going to be replacing his Twitter account with cruise missiles? These are real questions you have to ask. Somebody who's so driven by bitter resentment, letting him have access to the nuclear launch codes is certainly concerning.
And inside, I haven't paid much attention to today, McKay, but yesterday there was so much grievance, so much anger, so much wallowing and violence and grief. And this is an angry constituency, isn't it?
It really is. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that This is, there's a reason that this candidacy has taken off. He certainly is a candidate like none other that we've seen in American history, or at least in modern American history. But there's a reason for that, and that's because America is reaching a boiling point in a lot of ways. There are a lot of people extremely angry at an economic system and a political system they feel has disenfranchised them. And with all the violence we've seen in the past few months, whether they were domestic terror attacks or shootings of police officers or shootings of African Americans by police, all of this has contributed to this kind of mood of extreme anxiety and extreme grievance and resentfulness in this country. And Donald Trump has tapped into that better than I think any politician we've seen in a very long time.
McKay Coppins, who writes for BuzzFeed. That article is really worth reading. 6:21. At a time when women are taking to the stage in international politics like never before, our government says more diversity is needed in local government. It wants to see more women stand for council at this year's election, but a number of women councillors have already announced they're stepping down. Our regional reporter, Tracy Neal, asked them why.
Minister for Women, Louise Upston, says about 30% of those elected 3 years ago were women, and she'd like to see more.
One of the challenges is only a third of the candidates that stand for local councils are women. So I'm really keen to see the lift in the number of candidates in this year's election, and I'm sure that will mean we get a different outcome.
Ms Upston says local democracy can only work when everyone's voice is heard. She says it's up to communities to encourage broader representation.
One of the things is firstly identifying women that you think would be great at representing you in your community. I'd really encourage some shoulder tapping of some fantastic women in your community. In some instances, it's just not something they've thought of.
Hamilton's two-term mayor Julie Hardacre is calling it quits to return to her law career. She says local government is male-dominated, especially at mayoral level, but she doesn't think it's a gender issue putting women off.
Women are sort of still traditionally the primary caregivers, not wanting the public or media exposure, money, and so the income that you earn as a councillor in many places across New Zealand is quite low. So they were practical issues.
But would-be candidate Jen Brunya of Ashburton believes male attitudes are entrenched and they are putting women off. She's no stranger to local politics as a flag bearer for Canterbury water issues, but says the Cronies Club abounds.
And my observation is that they have very little respect for women, and we see that a lot in Parliament as well. You know, the disrespect shown to women as they make a submission or a presentation. You know, they're laughed at and jeered at, and I just think it's absolutely disgusting.
Mrs Brunya says women are great organisers, are adept at thinking about long-term benefits and are well placed to disband the big boys club around council tables. Long-serving Tasman councillor Judine Edgar, who's also stepping down, says it is different for women, but not in ways people might expect. She had a 3-year-old when she was elected 12 years ago and says a supportive husband allowed her to manage the long hours. Ms Edgar says women bring different perspectives. They sometimes have to speak louder to get heard, but a well-functioning council needs a diverse team.
I do think that it does need to be the right people and the people who'll bring the dedication, good knowledge of the community, connections, people who are prepared to put the work in. You need diversity around the table. That is the key.
Dunedin City Councillor Hilary Calvert is bowing out because of frustrations around the process. She says if you're not part of the Greek chorus that now prevails, it's hard to get anything done.
The rules now are such that the Mayor chooses the chairs of committees. It can create a natural grouping of people who are like-minded to the Mayor, and those who aren't necessarily of like mind have a lesser role to play.
But Julie Hardacre says there are ways around the barriers.
The other thing I would say is that if you are genuinely interested in, having a say about your community and influencing the decisions that might be made about where you live, then, you should give it a go.
Nominations close on August the 12th. For Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
A new subdivision on the Kapiti Coast beachfront north of Wellington is banning cats on some properties. The question is, how do the cats know which one? The Kotaku Park subdivision borders the Waikanae Estuary Scientific Reserve, and the sections closest to the reserve have a strict no cats policy imposed on them, no exceptions. Stuart White is a real estate agent selling the sections, and a short time ago he told me why.
It's very much an environmental area, and it's an estuary where there's nesting birds and migrating birds. And so it was decided by the developer and their discussions with an environmental group, which was called Kapiti Environmental Action. They're now defunct, but at that stage in time, it was decided that because it was bordering onto this estuary, that they would put the no-cat rule in place.
And what's been the reaction to that?
Mixed. It knocked a few sales out because there's obviously cat lovers out there, and that's great. I mean, I've got cats myself. I've got no issues with cats. It's a few people have said that they think it's a magnificent idea and there should be more of it. Other people have said it's just a stupid covenant and that you could never police it. And what are you going to do if I do bring a cat in? And that sort of thing. But it's been very, very 50-50. But with people looking to buy in there, they just walk away when they hear the no cats.
Gareth Morgan's not the developer, is he, Stuart?
No, he's not. But I've had several texts this morning calling me the new Gareth Morgan, and that's not quite correct either.
No, although as a kid I spent a bit of time on that stretch of Waikanae coast, and they're beautiful, those seabirds that are all along there, and they are worth protecting. The problem is that the entire subdivision doesn't have a ban, does it, on the cats? It's just the beachfront properties, right?
It's just the ones that border the estuary.
The estuary.
Yeah.
And so who's going to tell the cats when they're crossing, when they're just kind of meandering from the area where they're allowed to the area where they're not allowed?
Well, exactly. That's my point. I've said to people, well, I can't police a cat walking across into this part of the subdivision. This is not the first one we've done. The other stage we had was in Taranui Way, and it was a 21 lot subdivision, and that's now sold out, and they had exactly the same covenant.
And how's that going? Is it? And so are people behaving themselves, or are they sneaking cats in?
No. Everyone's told it's very clear. You probably saw in the paper this morning. It's on the front. It's on every bit of advertising. It's on the signage, and people that are cat lovers have a look and go, "Oh, not any cats in here," and they don't make any further inquiry. Few people do challenge it. And I say, well, it's in the covenant, and
that's that.
That's that. I can't do anything about that.
And it's part of what makes that area special, right? I mean, that is a special little environment, a little micro environment.
It is, and this one here is more like a lifestyle block because the sizes are sort of 3,400 square metres, some of them, and some of them are 1,800 square metres.
Well, 3,400 square metres for one property, that's a suburb in Auckland, Stuart.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the sort of thing they are. So they're and they've got all native plantings and all that sort of thing, and magnificent views to the sea and over the estuary. They're pretty special, and the sort of people that are looking in there are probably a little bit more the greenie type people.
Right.
Yeah.
Just before you go, I'm fascinated by what's happening to property prices up the Kapiti Coast, because Transmission Gully is now actually being built and is going to happen, and so that will really shorten the commute. Are you seeing a rise in values up there?
Absolutely. It's the market's been the hottest it's been ever, and I've been doing this 29 years. And I've never seen a market anything like it.
And who's coming in? So are people moving north from Wellington? Are you getting a few Aucklanders coming south? Who's arriving there?
Yep, a few Aucklanders coming down this way, and also a lot of Wellington people coming out buying now so they can have a property here, and in 5 years' time, when Transmission Gully's finished, they will come out here, revamp the property and live here, because it'll only be about a 20-minute drive into town.
Stuart White, talking about the Kapiti Coast, specifically Waikanae. When I was a little guy, we used to have a hand net and collect flounder and crabs and cook them on the beach. Pretty magic. I'm not sure whether that still happens. A fantastic fish and chip shop there if you can't get any, or there were when I was a kid, which admittedly was quite a long way back into last century. Oh dear. Anyway, that's Checkpoint for tonight. We were going to talk today to a wonderful man called Kieran, who spends 4 hours a day driving to and from work so he can actually own his own home. He will be our guest tomorrow, along with a whole lot more stuff. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow night at 5. On behalf of the excellent Checkpoint team, a very good evening indeed.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A woman sent to live in a garage by Work and Income says the agency would be disgusted if it knew the state of the place. The co-leaders of the Māori Party say there's no current appetite for a formal alliance between the Māori and Mana parties, but there is openness to a more cohesive one. An Auckland man whose dog viciously mauled his son's face has applied to withdraw his guilty plea 3 years after being charged with owning a dog causing serious injury. And Mobil will no longer have to pay $10 million to clean up the heavily contaminated tank farm in Auckland. Our next news and weather is at 7.
In Country Life this week, we spend time with a man who asks a farmer how to grow grass and then does the opposite.
He's growing it so the cattle can graze on it and enjoy it and get the nutrition out of it. We grow it so we can cut it very, very